as you're meeting milestones in the early stages of development, it is critical to, again, get that input from who the user is going to be, who's going to be ultimately purchasing this product. And really having those early discussions only benefits the company in terms of getting that market entry sooner than later. If there isn't an awareness of what is coming, then it's hard to, have that strategy in place that when it is ready, you don't want to then be going to the table and saying, okay, here's our product. Here's what it does. Here's all the information. And then, okay, well, maybe you missed your purchasing window with our hospital organization. So let's talk in a year.
Welcome, MedTech Gurus. Today, as I mentioned in the introduction, we have an incredible guest with us, Jennifer Palinchik, the owner and CEO of SageMar Medical, a company dedicated to helping MedTech innovators successfully bring their products to market. With deep expertise in commercial strategy, business development, and market access, Jennifer has been instrumental in guiding medical technology companies through the complex commercialization process. With a background in biomedical engineering and business leadership, Jennifer is passionate about bridging the gap between innovation and adoption and ensuring that groundbreaking medical technologies reach the patients who need them the most. Hey, Jennifer, are you ready to be our guru today?
I sure am. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. And thanks for the kind introduction.
Yeah, you bet. We're very excited to have you. So tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
Yeah, definitely. As you mentioned, I am a biomedical engineer, so I'm in the science space. But something that not everybody knows is as a child, I was classically trained for singing and vocal techniques. I quickly abandoned that skill sometime around, I think it was sixth grade, when I decided to go into cheerleading. So at one point, I thought classical singing was going to be a career move for me. As far as my family, I have two wonderful daughters and a great husband who I've been with for over 26 years. We are a sports family. We love watching football, being engaged in sports. My girls are both in, are athletes in different sports. My husband and I like to golf when we get a free moment. Now that the weather is going to start turning, that will be something fun to engage in. And we have a puggle who actually just turned 17 last month.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yes.
And how old are your daughters?
My daughters are 5 and 12.
Oh, what a great age. So very active at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So, Jennifer, SageMar Medical plays a crucial role in helping MedTech companies navigate the whole commercialization process. So at a high level, I'm wondering if you can walk us through what your company does and how you support innovators in the space. Can you help us out with that?
Yeah, definitely. So I started as SageMar Medical to really provide strategic consulting and comprehensive support for the medical device industry. Really helping companies navigate the commercialization with expertise in areas of business strategy, corporate development, understanding where partnership and mergers and acquisitions come together, the regulatory compliance side, of course, product development and engineering. That's where I actually started in this field over 22 years ago. And then wrapping it all together with the quality management system solutions. So essentially, these are all the areas that are really critical for innovators, whether they're startup company, large organizations. All of these areas are really essential to drive the success of creating and bringing new devices to the market.
Yeah, that sounds very comprehensive in what you're doing. And, I would think it's really valuable for an innovator to get an outside resource such as yourself. Or is that what you find to be true?
Yeah, there's always some interesting points about the outsourced market. So even large organizations who have entire departments that provide support and expertise in these areas, they often have either bandwidth issues or even expertise. I know we'll probably get into the AI area of medical device later in our discussion. But instead of bringing on internal resources to provide a certain area of expertise, outsourcing that effort has been very beneficial for companies on the larger scale side, but also very beneficial for the MedTech group or the MedTech companies that are just starting out, and they're not quite sure where to go or what resources are going to be required to do to accomplish what they're looking for.
Yeah, yeah, that's very helpful. And one of the biggest challenges today, we talk a lot to innovators on this podcast, but companies are challenged when they're trying to bring new products to market. From your perspective, what are the more common mistakes that you see the companies making, and how do you recommend they avoid them?
I would say the biggest, common mistake that I see when I'm meeting with, new clients is just the lack of understanding of the full landscape and the magnitude of bringing a product to market in our, in the medical device industry. A lot of products could fall into a certain category where there's similar products on the market. And many companies will have that misconception that, well, there's already something that exists. So I don't have to necessarily go through all of the same avenues that that company did, which is definitely not the case. So on the technical side, the amount of documentation, testing, risk analysis is pretty substantial and often, misunderstood when people are looking at what it's going to take to get the product to market. On the other side is the value of the device. And I don't mean value in terms of necessarily in terms of financial. Yes, that's a very critical piece. But what is the value of the product in the market? A lot of innovators will come to me with this great idea and they find that it will be groundbreaking. But that doesn't necessarily mean the market's going to agree. And if there's no adoption in the market or there's no strong market analysis to truly understand if this product is important and different than, potentially standard of care or other products that are out there, then adoption becomes very limited and the product will never take off from the ground. So I think what's really important for companies to really understand before they embark on this journey to develop, products and market entry is to really spend the time and the effort to develop that robust regulatory pathway, market analysis, reimbursement strategy, and a product development plan. And having all of those facets well thought out from a strategic perspective, and also an execution plan will be key to their success.
Yeah, I like that product development and then the execution plan, right? To that whole process. So it kind of leads into my next question because, we've got a lot of gurus out there working on innovations. They're soon to be entrepreneurs or are entrepreneurs. So with that, what is kind of boiling into that? What is the most critical factor in those plans and turning that into a successful commercial product? Can you take us a little deeper there?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's a most critical factor.
Hmm.
There's a many critical
Okay,
factors.
fair enough.
If, thinking about what I know it takes for inventors to really bring their product successfully to market, it's always comes up to market need, clinical need. Does anybody need this product? Regulatory. Again, being in a highly regulated industry, that's what without the regulatory clearance, you don't have a product that can even be, sold. And then also on the business side, really having a suitable business model that, you can, a suitable and a sustainable business model. So there's different avenues that can be taken from the business perspective, whether that's creating a product that you would like to sell off immediately and you actually never come to market with the product, or actually saying, I would like to start a medical device company. And this is the model and the information and the infrastructure that will be required to do so. And, talking a little bit more deeper about each of those, I think, again, the innovation itself must have a a clear market need with compelling differentiation from what's already existing in the market. And then, moving forward to the clinical side. So how do you tell if there's actually a problem and this is going to solve it? It's, early engagement with those like clinicians and researchers, industry experts. The more people understand what you're trying to do, the more buzz, the more, information that gets out there that you can use to then try to leverage even, developing the product itself. And then also your scalability and what market position. So, having that well-defined go-to-market strategy, which includes, distribution channels and partnerships and pricing, those are all items that you have to really put together to, try to establish that competitive edge with what's already existing in the market.
Yeah, that sounds that's very helpful, but in a way, it sounds overwhelming, right? If and you work with many different startups, so I'm just kind of wondering, you get an innovator in there that's at the very early stages. I mean, this whole thing can seem like just a jungle of challenges that they've got to get through. So, what advice do you give, like an early stage an innovator who's just starting to think about this and they come to you? How do we set that up? How do you start to develop that plan?
I would say I would definitely recommend that these innovators, they, I guess, become sponges of knowledge and absorbing information. It's really important to identify the right partners and resources that can help you. I strongly recommend, doing your homework on identifying the appropriate people, whether it's consultants, whether it's employees, mentors, advisory board members, really trying to ensure that you're leveraging as much as you can and from an expertise level, and spending that time and effort, to kind of get the innovators to really integrate their regulatory strategy, their reimbursement strategy, clinical adoption. All of these from the outset have to be determined and intertwined and executed in parallel in order to have that successful path to market.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. And I see from my end, that commercialization process, right? But this whole struggling with, yeah, balancing the R&D with commercialization efforts, and then all of a sudden they get through that. I find often that companies go, "Great, I got through my FDA authorization. Now what?" Right? So how do you help them with what best practices do you have for balancing that R&D, but also at the same time think about that commercialization process? Do you have any insights for us there?
Yeah, doing one versus the other, not in parallel, retroactively. Obviously, those are going to lead to failures and not commercialization, non-success. So I think what I would recommend is, when you're thinking about each of the points, getting up to commercialization, you really cannot consider the commercialization aspects as an afterthought because at the R&D portion, for instance, aligning your R&D with the market needs, engaging with those clinicians and even patients and key opinion leaders really is important to validate your usability and your market demand. And then also conducting that market research alongside the technical development portion is what helps you, ensure that you're able to develop a product based on the feedback from the field. And then again, it's always a known point of the regulatory and the reimbursement strategies, and we've touched on those quite a bit. But, when you get to the commercialization piece, R&D does play very closely in those arenas. And that's because you're still developing the product, but you're also reaching out to the commercialization partners and the hospital organizations and developing, that like a strategy for pricing. And, that then ties back into the R&D side of, well, I can't create a product where the cost of goods is astronomical that then nobody's going to buy it. So, it really has to be viewed as a fluid exercise between the development side and the commercialization side, not just in terms of the distribution channel or the sales channel, but how those two mix together in terms of product development and actually creating a product, that will be able to be scaled. And, all of these activities, again, they improve the ability to have the product adopted once it's ready for commercialization. So,
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I was thinking about, you're talking about, KOLs and feedback, and I may put you on the spot here a little bit, but I'm kind of wondering, as a company's going through that process and you're investing a lot of, intellectual property and all this, but you get some of that negative feedback of, gee, this might not have the market or might not have the application you thought. How do you help adjust for that? Is that something that your team can do and help tweak that value proposition?
yes, definitely. So, again, it kind of ties to where an innovator has an idea, and many times the innovation piece, they think it's well thought out, and they've thought of all of the different avenues that their product could take. But oftentimes, the market, maybe they're not ready for all the bells and whistles, for instance, because you will get feedback from industry, from the KOLs, that that will vary. If you had five clinicians that are providing, their thoughts on a product, you're going to get five different answers. And at some point, you need to really hone in on, okay, I have to take the most important factors and incorporate those into my product. And then we can do add-ons once we, get to market. Once we are able to, we can get as much of the adoption piece from those KOLs, based on, incorporating some of their feedback into the initial product. And then, I always tell clients, don't just focus on, the Rolls Royce of the company or of the product. Sometimes you do have to start with, kind of the minimal viable product, and then build onto that portfolio and, that platform once you gain all of the information on the field. Because, one thing that a lot of innovators think is they have to get it perfect at the outset of, providing the product to the industry. But once a product is out there, you're going to get, I wouldn't say endless amounts of feedback, but there's going to be, areas for improvement, things that you couldn't possibly just think of, at the earlier stage of development. And it's really just trying to hone in on, is this a must have or a need to have? And that's where, working with the value prop and what will be, important for the innovators really ties in.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And, that leads me into that whole scaling, right? We all want to see our product take off and scale. So, how do you help with that go to market strategy, right? So, to get them ready, I think there's always the challenge if a product doesn't take off, but the converse is also maybe challenging that it really does take off and you've got to scale quickly. Is that something your team can help the innovator set up for, that they're ready to really, streamline manufacturing and enhance the unit production?
Yes. So the go-to-market strategy, again, it ties into the R&D side as well. When you think about, having all of your suppliers and your cost of goods honed in based on pricing strategy, distribution channels, and really, I guess, what quote orders you have in place before you get started, that whole commercialization and adoption piece really gives you an awareness of how things are going to start. A lot of times, for instance, if there's a product where the expectation is to be like machined, for instance, a machine product. But when we look at the business strategy and the commercialization go to market plan and, the adoption possibilities, it may be appropriate to pick something more large scale at the outset, at the onset of getting the product developed. So there's definitely a balance of understanding, what are your volumes? What are your anticipated volumes? Nobody has a crystal ball, unfortunately, but we certainly want to make sure that we're thinking of that longer term scalability factor and what that ramp up could look like. Because, the time that it takes, especially in this regulated environment, when you start making major changes, for instance, to manufacturing, to how a product is provided to the end user. Now you are literally, I wouldn't say starting from scratch, but there's, a lot of regulatory implications that have to be determined and evaluated. And then how does that look from, all of your testing, your verification and validation testing, and your regulatory clearance documentation? These are all factors that you don't want to be in a situation where you didn't have that scalability in mind. And now you're, essentially on hold from a product commercialization perspective until you can ramp all of that up.
Yeah, yeah, I can see. And I would think that, even if you accidentally missed a step, right, that could be rather unforgiving, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, every step is critical when it comes to developing something and going to market. Even a simple colorant change, for instance, in a product could have a trickling effect that would be very adverse in the timing and delays in manufacturing or delays in regulatory clearance, and then ultimately delays in getting to market and starting to gain that traction and that revenue.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's helpful. And we touched a little bit on sales and scaling, but obviously, sales and distribution are critical for that scaling piece, right? And you touched a little bit on some of the KOLs and some of that initial research. What are some of how do these hurdles? How do the companies deal with some of these hurdles in building an effective sales strategy? And what are your thoughts about overcoming them? How do we package all that and come out with that sales strategy ready to go? Do you have any insights for us there?
Yeah, I think the sales strategy, some of the biggest hurdles, they fall in under like delays in commercialization planning. So going back to a previous topic we talked about, where how do you balance R&D and commercialization? Well, some companies, they focus so much on R&D that they put the sales strategy discussions on the back burner. And this can definitely result in lost time, missed opportunities for early market positioning, getting that adoption piece ahead of actually being able to go to market. Again, going into the clinical and market needs, those are all part of sales, because as you're developing your sales strategy, you need to have those the sales personnel or reps, or whatever channel that looks like. You need to have them having conversations before the product is ready, so that when the product is ready, you can immediately start moving forward. Pricing and reimbursement, those are very critical. Is there a reimbursable like a code for this product? What are the coding options? What is the economic positioning to be able to have address any payer requirements, or also difficulty with just making sure that there is a code that this falls under. And then what is that pricing strategy? You really have to look at your competitors, or the reimbursement, what's going to be reimbursed versus what people are actually going to pay, out of pocket expenses. So these are all areas that really need to be honed in on, from a sales channel. A lot of the sales strategy should also include, is there going to be a distribution network? Will I be selling the product out of, from distributors versus like an actual company based sales team? So these are kind of all of the strategic partnerships that you want to make sure align with how you intend to grow, and at what stages that growth and scalability strategy comes into play from a sales perspective.
Yeah, that's really useful. And this may be an oversimplification, but I'm thinking that some of the investment you make up front on some of that R&D and some of that value work can be almost repurposed, if you will, on the other side when you get ready to commercialize, and use that as support for the sales team to go out and talk to the end user. Am I on the right track with that?
Oh, definitely. So as you're meeting milestones in the early stages of development, it is critical to again get that input from who the user is going to be, who's going to be ultimately, purchasing this product. And, really having those early discussions only benefits the company in terms of getting that market entry sooner than later. If people don't, if there isn't an awareness of what is coming, then it's hard to, have have that strategy in place that when it is ready, you don't want to then be going to the table and saying, okay, here's our product. Here's what it does. Here's all the information. And then, okay, well, maybe you missed your purchasing window with our hospital organization. So let's talk in a year. So these are things that you definitely want to avoid. But having those early discussions will really help push the awareness and the training and the understanding of what your product is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. So, Jennifer, you've been deeply involved in MedTech commercialization for years. I'm kind of curious, as we talk now, what trends do you see, moving forward? What's shaping the future of the industry? Can you provide us any thoughts there?
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, yes, I've been part of this industry again for over 22 years, and there are shifts and trends that I would say come up annually, every few years, both on the product side as well as just the business side. So, as I mentioned earlier, the medtech industry is always undergoing, transformative shifts driven by advancements in the technology side. So you have AI. Everybody's talking about AI and machine learning and med tech. Really just having those AI powered or German medical devices, predictive analysis. Those are all technologies that are really revolutionizing and transforming, healthcare decision making and really just supporting, products. I'm actually speaking on a webinar next week on this topic, focusing more on the regulation side. So aside from technology, there's always a shift in, how FDA views the devices and how they regulate devices. And so they're always refining their best practices, their current thinking, and really trying to streamline, the approval pathways and the approval process to help out industry. And I always advise that, anybody working in this industry really should view the FDA as, as a support for them. Early engagement with FDA and regulatory agencies is really critical to making sure that you aren't inadvertently going in the wrong path. And missing some of those steps that we said can be very, very critical. Other shifts that I see are wearables, remote patient monitoring. So again, like all of the digital health and all of those avenues where data and intel is very important and critical as we continue to evolve from a healthcare perspective. And sometimes data can maybe seem overkill, but it can also be really critical to ensuring that healthcare providers are really understanding trends in how patients physiology may be evolving over years, or anatomical pre-planning is always really helpful from okay, well, how is their overall wellness and health before you go into like a major procedure or something along those lines. So I think those are some major points. There's definitely then the consolidation piece. So we hear throughout every year, huge mergers and acquisitions. We hear about strategic partnerships and joint ventures. So really understanding, a lot of, the M&A is playing a crucial role in being able to commercialize, these new innovative products in different ways. So, large med tech firms, for instance, they're acquiring startup companies with breakthrough technologies because they're able to, potentially get those products onto the market faster than a large organization. So it's kind of that de-risking factor where, I guess companies that are a little bit more nimble and flexible can bring these breakthrough technologies to market sooner than a large organization. We see a lot of strategic partnerships as well, where a small innovation company partners with a large organization, and they go along the path together, so that at the end, that it makes that transition a lot more smoother. So these are really influencing how technology advancements to market, really come together from a joint venture, a partnership, or an M&A perspective that we see all throughout the year, every year.
I would think that the strategic partnerships and some of those M&A activities, if somebody was looking at that as a strategy, I think reaching out to a firm like yours might help making sure all of those regulatory pieces are buttoned up before you got too deep into that type of discussion. Is that something that you find helpful?
Yes, M&A due diligence is what we provide. So it really is looking at all of the technical documentation. I do have partners that focus on the financial side and some of those areas, but from my personal expertise, it's really looking at how has the company developed this product, and have they checked all of the regulatory compliance boxes that a large scale company can then take on, bring it into their own system, and continue to move forward with providing this product to market. Confirming that the documentation, all of the testing met those requirements, and that they can safely and effectively sell this product for its intended use.
Yeah, yeah, gotcha. So, Jennifer, this really seems like an exciting time for you and your team at SageMar Medical. What's the future hold? Where are you going from here?
So the future's bright. We continue to push forward with working with companies that have strategic innovations in the space where technology is really evolving. So again, working with several companies in the AI driven medical device area. We also have always been part of 3D printing is one of those areas that continues to evolve. It's been a big deal, especially in orthopedics. And so I'm seeing those, we're seeing innovation in those areas kind of expand from, the orthopedic side to other surgical specialties. Also, what we're getting involved with a lot is navigation, mixed reality, augmented reality. So, a lot of the customization of, increasing, advancing like surgical planning and being able to enhance precision and procedural accuracy for for various surgical specialties. And then also, SageMar is always expanding our network with leading MedTech innovators and companies, healthcare systems, working with KOLs to help support, some of our startup companies, and really just helping to bridge the gap between the product development, the clinical side, and then how we're going to get to the end, and what that exit looks like for our startup companies.
Well, it does sound like a very exciting time for you and your team. So, Jennifer, I would first of all like to just acknowledge and thank you for the time that you took to prepare to be our guru today. If somebody wants to learn more, is there a website? Are you on LinkedIn? How do we learn more about what you and your team are up to?
Yeah, anybody can visit our website, sagemarmedical.com. You could reach out to me directly, Palinchik at sagemarmedical.com, or follow our company LinkedIn page. We have a LinkedIn page, or of course, feel free to connect with me directly on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to share more information of how we could help.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, Jennifer, once again, thank you so much for being our guru today. We really appreciate the insights that you brought to us.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate the opportunity as well.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SylvesterHarris 5048 at gmail.com. And I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.